All right, is this recording? All right, it looks like it's recording. So, all right, so I guess this is our first Force Athletics podcast episode with an actual live person besides myself talking. So, so Sean, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into coaching.
Right. Hi for everyone out there. My name is Sean Foulkes. I'm the head throws coach at Portage Northern High School in Portage, Michigan. I was a 4-year varsity athlete in high school, all-state in the discus. Went off and did a year at Ferris State and kind of shot myself in the foot academically.
Mm-hmm.
Took the long way around to getting my degree, but ended up getting one from Western Michigan University with a Bachelor's of Science. And started coaching at my old high school,
Mm-hmm.
and did that for a couple of years as a volunteer and then as the assistant head coach, and then went to a bigger division, had a little more success, and kind of bounced around. And now I've been at Portage now for six or 7 years now, and it's just been a fantastic.
Yeah, so I mean, your kids at Portage over the last few years, I mean, it looks like you're taking over the state of Michigan with your performances, and I mean, you've had a lot of kids go Division I. So, talk a little bit about your like how you've grown as a coach from when you started in your first position a few years ago to yourself now. Like, what have you learned more about coaching, and what are some things that, like, man, I wish I knew this when I first started, but I'm glad my kids now are reaping the benefits of my knowledge, I guess.
Well, when I first started coaching, I was very green because when I was in high school, I didn't have a throws coach, a lot like a lot of kids out there in high school.
Sure.
And so it was my dad on the weekends, and we're doing was it the Al Feuerbach basic 70-foot shot put video?
I remember that video. Yeah.
And it was lots of hours of looking at video on VHS tapes and trying to learn the technique that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just nothing like I know now. I mean, the networking that I've gone through from the beginning to now, the advancements in technology have been huge. I know a lot of coaches use Coach's Eye or Huddle technique. I use Huddle personally. But it's just that in and of itself has been a game changer for how we be able to connect with our kids.
Sure.
And make some changes. But I think probably the biggest thing I wish I would have known starting coaching was just to be a little more proactive in the planning.
Sure.
Small high schools, not a lot of facilities. You get very creative. And you try and figure out ways to, as I say, MacGyver your way to success.
Right.
And that has served me really well. And if there were any beginning coaches out there or people looking to get into coaching, I would say go find a school that has next to nothing.
Right.
Because if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere.
Right. Well, I've seen that because in some of the videos that you post of your kids, like you throw with makeshift weights. You throw up against a wall, and your kids still have like success. So how, like with like when I competed in college, technology wasn't, like, Facebook was just starting, nothing was out. So how do you, with, like, if your kids, follow other people on Instagram or Twitter and whatnot, and they see these like shiny new toys that everybody has, like, how do you keep them in check with, hey, you know what, like, we're still doing well, like, it's okay to throw with a heavy med ball and a sack against a wall, like, we're still going to be okay. Like, you ever have, like, your kids, you ever have conversations like that, or how do you build that into when a freshman comes onto the team for the first time?
Well, we have those conversations all the time.
Sure.
And quite frankly, I like using it as kind of a carrot on the stick. Like, you want it so bad, throw far enough, we'll get you.
Right.
We've been blessed to have a great coaching staff that's been very supportive of the throwing events over the years, and we've asked for some pretty outlandish things. Like when I asked for the pieces for the makeshift weights, they kind of said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. Like we'll just, you'll be happy come championship time." I would say though that for some of our kids coming in, we have the benefit in our program that our middle school is next to our high school. So I control our high school throws and our middle school throws all under one umbrella.
Well, that's
So
great.
all our middle school throwers that feed into our program, they'll do the same drills and technique. So they're also having those conversations really early about, oh, here's this shiny new discus for 70 meters, or here's this new tool. Like I think they came out with like the turbo hammers that were out in one of the catalogs. Like I think those things are great, but if I can make it cheaper here, then I'm going to do it.
Sure.
It's one thing I like to use because I do think it gives them a chip on their shoulder to say, you know what, we may not have the best tools, but one day we will, and we're still going to beat you until then. That's kind of the goal we want to have going into any of our practices or anytime we look at those things.
So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you just had your state championships, right, in Michigan.
Yep.
Right. And so in Michigan, so because we've talked about this before, so the indoor season, it's like official, but not like really, like it's not really sanctioned by the state, right? Or is it like where a bunch of schools come together? So how did this past weekend go for your kids at your state championships?
This past weekend was a little tough.
Sure.
We had kids come in and they were seated to do very well. We had one young man, a junior, who was, oh goodness, I mean, if you can picture this, he's the very first kid warming up, and he one turns like 61 feet in his warm up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's we're good. Just keep doing that, fine.
Sure.
Because 62 or 63 ended up winning the thing, right?
Okay. Right.
But of course, like so many young kids, he likes to kind of grip and rip a little bit, and it was just like watching that Titanic start to sink a little.
Right.
But he had a few good throws. We had another young fellow who's been coming out with us that he did really well. He medaled at indoor state as well. We had a young lady who medaled at indoor for the shot put, taking 5th. But the other nice thing about this, though, is that some of these kids that are with our indoor crew come from different schools.
Okay.
So it's not just ours, because as you said, it is an unofficial. Hey, bud. Here. Sorry, I've got Coach Junior here too.
That's all right. Hey, buddy, how's it going?
You say hi?
No, that's okay.
No, this little guy has been going to track meets since he was like 2 weeks old. So he's been to several indoor meets and outdoor meets.
Sure.
But no, we had, what can I say? I mean, we had a lot of our young kids PR, which was great.
Right.
But we have kids come from other schools, and how we approach this is because our indoor season is not sanctioned. It's one of these kids will end up forming clubs, or they'll go on a town.
Sure.
And they go to college campuses and they pay an entry fee, and then they can hit qualifiers and go from there. But it's really, no, can't wear any school apparel, can't have school transportation, which works for some kids, and others it's kind of tough. But we like to make sure that kids in our area have the opportunities to pursue some of these events, because most kids never get the chance to touch a weight until they get to college, or a hammer or a javelin, because we work with that too. And we just say, if you want to learn to throw farther, you can come with us. If your coach is okay with it, if your head coach is okay with it, and your parents are okay with it, and then if your coaches want you to do something in our program, we'll work with you on that. Like, we're not going to try to reinvent the wheel for you. We want to support other coaches getting better and their programs getting better. We have a young fella right now from another school that threw like 169 indoors in the discus earlier this winter, that last year only threw like 130. Okay. So I mean, we want to help kids hit the mark that they want to hit too. Right.
So how is, like, culture wise, like, how do you bring kids together from different high schools who might, if they might play different sports against each other in the fall, for example, and then they come together for indoor track there? How would you, like, do you do any activities or like team building things that kind of brings everybody together as a group, especially from different high schools? So can you give a couple examples, or one example of something to help bring everybody together as a team?
Oh yeah, I mean, we do a few different things throughout the year. A lot like a lot of colleges, we do like a throws giving every Thanksgiving, and kind of like end our fall training. So any kids that aren't doing fall sports for the schools, they can come and do like a lot of basic early season conditioning stuff with us. And then They'll end with the throws giving, and then we move into our winter kind of competitive training cycle, and we'll do like a dollar store Secret Santa Christmas party.
Okay. Yep.
That way, kids who may not have a lot can still be a part of it. And if they can't even afford that, then we can help them out and take care of them. But nobody feels like somebody has more or has less, because at the end of the day, a lot of the things we do, we want them to feel connected to not just a team that they have that they represent in the spring, but we want them to feel connected to the throwing community as a whole. We want them to be able to look out and be able to see other throwers and say, man, they're on the same journey that I'm on. And, oh, did you see that girl throw that far? Like, I want to be like her someday, and maybe I'll reach out. And we encourage our kids to reach out to some of these top throwers and say, hey, great job. Like what would you do if you were doing this? We host a couple of camps in the summer, and we have Chuck Inequichi, former pro. He comes out and he hosts a camp. Kids love him out here. Grant Cartwright comes out and does a camp with kids. Oh yeah, and kids just have a ball with it. And the nice thing is, for those athletes they're pro athletes, they're trying to work towards that stuff. We show our kids that we try and help other throwers by saying, look, we're going to make it cheap enough that kids can afford it by saying it's about $20, but then the speaker gets it all. Like, we don't take a cut personally, because we want the kids to see us helping other throwers on their journey. So maybe one day, if they're ever in a position to help a thrower, they can do it. We do, every now and then we get stacks of old stocks of shoes, like for Nike Throw shoes. And we have kind of a, I guess you could say, bowling alley type philosophy, where they are the program shoes. And once you're done, if they're still good enough, cycle them back in. And that way kids can still use shoes these years. And if kids are seniors and they didn't wear through their shoes, donate them back to the program, get your tax write off, but be able to help a kid that's going to come up after you and be able to give back. And this year, because we're opening our brand new facilities for our outdoor season, we're going to even have an alumni cookout event where the past throwers can come and meet some of our current kids.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you definitely, in the 6 years that you've been there, you've definitely kind of started putting together that culture and like the, team building and team bonding atmosphere. How do your kids that have graduated from the program, when they come back and they see how things are going, like, do you ever have them like talk to the current athletes? Because you've had some kids go D1, and have done pretty successful at the collegiate level. So how is their relationship with the current throwers? Like, do they come back often, or is it just, they stay in contact via like social media?
Well, we do have some throwers that are far enough out with colleges and whatnot that it is harder for them to get back. But they do tend to follow all of our kids that are current in the program that we highlight. It's part of why when we have our posts on social media, we tag all the kids so our past throwers can see what they're doing and be able to feel like they're still connected to it and a part of it. We are fortunate that we have some kids that live close enough that graduated that they try and make it out for at least one meet every spring. And try and come back and see some of the athletes compete in fall sports or winter sports. We were lucky enough last year to have one of my former kids even be our middle school throws coach, which was really exciting. Kind of another kid on his journey. Awesome guy, Carter Taverna. He's going to do amazing things with his life. Just so proud of him. But even our athletes have come back. And we've had some kids that have gone from other schools and trained with us. They come back and they show us how they're doing. And we get texts and messages from their parents like, hey, so-and-so did great at the conference championships. And we just wanted to share that with you guys. Like, we miss you. And I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's kind of what we wanted to create, is a family atmosphere where none of the kids that have graduated ever feel like they're too far removed from the program. They still feel like it's theirs.
Well, that's great. I mean, every once in a while, I'll get messages from some of the first like kids that I coached in college, and it's cool to have like, wow, I didn't mess it up that bad the first go around, because I had no idea what I was doing when I first started, especially at the college level. So you hope for the best, and I mean, I think they turned out okay, enough to stay in contact. But to circle back with this past weekend, you mentioned one of your kids. warming up pretty well and then maybe not performing as well as he thought. Like talk to me about that, because I ask coaches that question all the time. How do you deal with like the mental side of throwing, or if an athlete is expected to perform well and then for whatever reason in the heat of the moment it doesn't go as well. Like, do you pull the athlete aside during the meet? Like, is it after? Like, how do you approach an athlete's supposed to throw 60 feet, but they throw 55 and they don't do as well as they thought they should have?
That's pretty much exactly what happened. So this is a great question. No, we try and focus on one or two cues during the meet.
Sure.
And we go in knowing that these are probably the one or two pieces that we're going to need to focus on to really hit a good throw.
Right.
If things aren't going as well, or we notice other things, we'll make note of them. But we won't bring them up during the meet. We just want to stick to our cues.
Right.
After the meet, we put it into perspective. We always want the kids to understand, like, hey, like, you may have not done as well as you wanted to do today, but let's look long term. The people ahead of you are gone, or if you had been on your A game, if you had hit the positions you needed to hit, you would have won. Like, we want them to always know that even if they didn't perform well, that they're still competitive with the people that they're going against.
Right.
Our biggest thing is trying to get the kids, though, to that point where the distances are just not in their hands anymore. It just becomes, let me hit this one technical point and everything else clicks. I actually had a kid, a couple of years ago, Randy Prince. He was our state discus champ in 2017. And he sends me this text a couple of weeks before New Balance Nationals. And he says, Coach, I've been looking at athletic.net and I'm not worried about it anymore.
Right.
And I was like, that's the moment you know.
Right. So when you have kids that are returning that might be, let's say top 5 or top 10 in the state, something like that, like do you work with each athlete individually and talk about, what are some goals, some things that you have for the indoor season? What do you want to do outdoor? Like, do you ever have like individual sessions with kids at even starting at the middle school level of, what do you, what's an outcome that you want to happen this season? Like, do you do anything like that with your athletes?
We always have a goal session with each of the kids, but a lot of it ends up being very informal when we start the season, like when we're going through our conditioning stuff. Because for a lot of our kids, they might just come out during the spring season. So that's the first time we're getting the chance to see them again.
Right.
And with that being said, it's that first couple of weeks, we just pull them aside and say, hey, here's how we've done the last couple of years. If you do everything you're supposed to, here's where we project you being.
Right.
How can we improve upon that? How can we go a little bit bigger and better than that? For our kids that are with us pretty much all year grinding it out, we say, okay, right now, here's where we are. And normally our kids will be competing through the summer and they're trying to get a few more marks in before fall conditioning starts up. So if we start in the fall, we say, all right, by the end of November, I want my strength numbers to be roughly here. And I want to be hitting good technical positions in these areas.
Right.
And that's for a lot of it is for our beginner kids or our middle school kids. And then for our top end kids, we say, all right, if I'm starting in August, where do I want to be at New Balance Indoor Nationals? Where do I want to be at state nationals? Like, that's got to be the goal. And then we try and chart everything backward towards where we are now. And it works out pretty well. Most of our kids have had a lot of success. But the really neat thing, though, isn't the kids that are at the top end for us. It's the kids who came in that were like the 14th kid on the roster, and now they're one of the top 4 varsity kids. Because for us in outdoor, our conference has it where you have to designate 4 athletes as varsity before the meet starts, and they're the only ones that can score points.
So does that rotate for you like every week, just based on like how practices go, or is it just the top 4 for pretty much the whole season?
No, it becomes a little bit like the Wild West. Like if you're one of the top 4 numbers, we need to be able to get you in there and be able to get points for the team, because we want our throwers coming in thinking that we need to take as many points as possible on the throwing side to make
Right.
it easier for our sprinters, jumpers, and distance runners, so
Sure.
that they can seal the deal for us in the meet. Like if we
Right.
can take all the points we can get, that's great. We've done our job.
Mm-hmm.
So to that end, we want to give kids a chance to be able to go out there and be competitive. Our JV kids will still get to compete at a lot of those dual meets that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if a kid bumps up, well, maybe they're the kid that is going to the invite that weekend, or maybe
Right.
they're the kid that is going to hit their qualifier. The nice thing is a lot of our kids, based on what we've done, because I have an assistant throws coach as well named Gary Vanderweel, who is just phenomenal. Does a lot of our like strength training, conditioning based stuff.
Okay.
He's one of the greatest guys I've ever met. He's just phenomenal. Based on what we've worked on together, our kids end up peaking those last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Whether you're a JV that ends 2 or 3 weeks early, or you're a varsity kid that goes all the way to state and nationals, our kids still end up peaking right in that window.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a nice little system.
So with your assistant that handles like the strength and conditioning stuff, does that do you start like at 7th, 8th grade, like in the middle school? Like, is there
Yes.
like do you engage the parents at all in like that strength and conditioning piece? Like, is that just part of like the program?
Absolutely. We're all for parents even coming in and doing the same workout that the kids are doing.
Okay.
Like we want our program to feel as much of a family and as inclusive as possible. So if a mom or dad wants to come and check out what we're doing, they can come and ask as many questions as they want during a practice session.
Sure.
If they have an insight that they'd like to share, I'm all for it, because maybe they're seeing something that they don't, or maybe because their perspective is different than mine, I can gain something from that. So we always want them involved with that, but for the most part, we want our 7th and 8th graders on the same program our high school kids are doing, and we just adjust numbers for age.
Sure.
And allow them a chance to see what it's going to be like to be the best. Right. So if we start every year with 10 freshmen, our goal is to hopefully have 4 seniors by the time they graduate of that freshman group, which is relatively typical for some programs, because you're going to have kids that do the arts, or they do a different sport, or it's just they're just not doing it anymore. But the other nice thing is that none of our stuff in the summer, fall, or winter is mandatory. So it's all voluntary stuff. But that group of voluntary kids has gotten bigger each year. Like we had, I think our first year, maybe 2 or 3 kids. And now I've got like 15 to 20 that come out all the way from fall, all the way back through until summer.
Okay. So how many kids on average do you have a season, both men and women combined? You have like over 20 kids, 25 kids?
Yeah, I think we average closer to 30 throwers.
Wow.
Men and women combined.
Okay.
Our biggest year one year was 40 throwers. And that didn't include the middle school, because there are a lot of times that we'll fold them into what we're doing, so that everyone's working the same drills. So they get to see that that nobody's better than the next. Everyone had to go through the same struggles on their journey. So we might have some days where we have like 60 throwers all doing the same drills.
Wow. So how do you account for, trying to give everybody as much time as they deserve in regard? So I have 5 kids right now, and I find it difficult sometimes to give everyone the love that they need, and it's only 5, and I only have them for a couple hours a week. So when you have 40 kids at the same time, how do you structure that so everybody gets enough reps and enough drill work and things like that?
Well, a lot of what we do is based on station work, led by our upperclassmen or veterans in the program.
Okay.
Like I have one young gentleman who is a freshman this year, but because he's been with us since 6th grade, I mean, he is already fully rotating in shot. He's 3 turning in weight and hammer, and he's full spinning discus, and he looks fantastic. Okay. So I'm confident giving him a group of kids to say, all right, you can work with this group on this drill, and then this other group will go with this kid. And it allows our upperclassmen, our kids who are more seasoned in the sport, to be able to connect with some of the younger kids as well. Right. But it also allows myself and my assistant throws coach, Gary, to be able to work between all the different groups and just keep rotating, so we show everyone a little bit of love at the same time.
Sure.
And then as the younger kids start to finish and wrap up, It's always the kids that were the captains or the veterans that were leading that now are staying after and getting more of their one-on-one time then.
Right. Okay. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if you were to give, somebody were to ask you some advice, a new coach starting out, what would be like one or two things that you would, encourage them to do, or be cognizant of about as they're starting their own throwing program or they're coming into coaching for the first time?
Well, I'd go back to go to a program that doesn't have anything to
Right.
start. If you have the opportunity, be the best advocate for your kids that you can be. Because a lot of the things that we have in our program now, we wouldn't have had if we weren't advocating for our kids.
Right.
Like our current outdoor facilities that are opening up. When I first got here, we had one discus cage and one shot ring. And you think about, you got 40 kids, you can't get a whole lot done in like competition circles. So when we got our new facilities, we advocated for 3 discus cages and 5 shot rings.
Okay.
We got it.
Right.
But that's because we were harping on them as to it's going to be efficient. It's going to be effective for the kids. It's going to have longevity. Like if one cage is busted, we can go to another cage. You have to lay it all out so that everyone has an idea as to why you're doing it. So have a little method to your madness, but advocate for your kids. And last thing I would say is ask as many questions as possible.
Okay.
Because the minute you think you know everything about it, stop coaching.
Sure. Right. Well, I've made you do all the talking. Do you have any questions for me while I have you here, or anything else, you want to share that I didn't ask about?
No, I do have one question for you because,
Sure.
For me, one of my aspirations down the road is to kind of go up to the college ranks.
Sure.
And what for you is the biggest challenge for kids coming from that high school level into the college ranks, outside of maybe scheduling classes around practices?
Well, it's interesting because I was talking, you must have been in on this phone conversation earlier today. I was talking to one of my former athletes who graduated in 2016. So Lewis graduated from NAS in 2016. He was a business major, and so we were talking about, because his group of his teammates, we didn't have any like pre-med majors. We didn't have anybody who wanted to be a doctor or work in the ER or anything like that. And that's been the most difficult thing that I found, especially like this year with my group. So I have 5 freshman female throwers. 2 of them are pre-med. 2 others want to be PTs, physical therapists. And then the other one wants to be a psychiatrist. So their coursework is, it's manageable. Like it's 15, 18 credit hours, but having them focus on throwing when they're at practice has been the biggest challenge that I've experienced this year. I was an education major, so I feel bad saying it, but it wasn't as hard as going to school to be a doctor. So
I get
it. In between reps, they're talking about, I need to memorize like these random cells, and I need to know, all the bones by, 4:00 this afternoon for this lab. So for me, it's been how to keep them engaged in what we're doing at the moment, and trying to turn off their college study brains and turn on their college throwing brains. For the most part here in Rochester, like we have one athlete who's from Pennsylvania. So she never threw the weight before, and she transitioned very well with that. She's a 2-sport, so she's a goalie on our soccer team. And then one of our other better throwers, she's a volleyball player in the fall too, or in the fall. So that's something new that we've experienced this year, where 2 of our throwers didn't start until like mid-November, and then our first indoor meet of the season is the first week of December. So they only had a couple weeks of practice. We try and learn the weight as best as we can. So something new that I've done this year is we threw the weight maybe like 3 times in the fall before our first season, and we just took hammer reps. So we throw in a racquetball court, which is great. So we're able to take tons of throws, very minimal time, because we're only walking, 5 feet to retrieve, from where we are. So that's been the most difficult thing, is how to get them more engaged in what we're doing at the time and not as focused on, trying to, memorize all these weird things that they have to do, which is great. I mean, I've coached, people who are principals now and other physical therapists and people in their MBAs and others in the Army and stuff like that. But each year it just seems to get more competitive educationally. And it's where I see sometimes the difficulties with, just trying to focus more on what, what we need to do for those couple hours. Like we practice 4 days a week for about an hour and a half each day. And then they go to the weight room. So I don't have that much contact with them. So a lot of what hopefully goes well on Fridays and Saturdays at meets is what they do outside of when I have them. So focus on their nutrition, trying to get more than like 6 hours of sleep at night, that's a new thing. Going to bed at 2 and getting up at like 6 or 7, like, trying to get, yeah. So, so those are the things that I never experienced when I was in college. Like I missed my fair share of classes because I wanted to throw. But
All right.
it was horrible.
Like,
yeah.
Been there at least once.
What's that?
Let's be honest. Who hasn't been there at least once?
Yeah, I mean, it was my undergrad. If anybody ever looks at those transcripts, I mean, they were horrible because I thought I was going to be a great thrower. So I didn't mind missing a class or two a week, which turned into like a month here and there. But I don't mind sharing that with my kids now, though, because I don't know if it puts something in perspective of them. Like, so they're all freshmen, so there isn't an older athlete that's kind of like been through it. So we're working on it together, and we're trying to figure out, okay, I want to be great, but I want to throw all 4 events outdoor. So I want to throw shot, disc, hammer, and javelin. So this week we talked a lot about, okay, let's pick 2 that you want to try and really do well at. And then the other 2 will be kind of like auxiliaries. So fortunately, I have 2 that want to focus more hammer disc. Another one wants to do discus javelin. I got a couple with the shot, and then one to just, I want to try all 4 all the time. So that helps me kind of put our plans in place for, okay, these couple girls are going to throw the hammer twice a week. They're going to throw shot once a week. They're going to throw discus twice a week. And then we try and put together plans for them that way. Where in the past, we never really experienced that. And as we never really say, maybe I've coached like 2 or 3 kids in the jav since I've been here. This is my 6th year, where everybody wants to throw the jab this year. So that's like a practice day by itself, because we don't have jav in New York State. My one Pennsylvania thrower, she threw it a little bit in high school. And Section 5, like Rochester, New York, and the Buffalo area, they just started with the weight like 4 years ago. So some of the kids kind of have a little bit of perspective, and they've thrown before. I mean, I would prefer if they didn't at all, and we just kind of like start from scratch. But this season worked. Our indoor season just wrapped up. This weekend is nationals, so unfortunately, we don't have any kids throwing there this year. But hopefully, within the next year or 2. We'll have some of our current group that goes there. So that's a long-winded answer to probably at least question that you asked. But yeah, the education component's really tough. But that's what Lewis and I talked about, is how, he said that they don't because he trains at Ashland, and that he doesn't really experience that with his kids during practice, that they're able to get there, they do their reps, they go to the weight room, and but they have so many kids that they might not have enough time to do that. Where with 5, if 2 or 3 of them are outside of our racquetball court and they're talking, sometimes they, their minds wander into, more important things, which are their studies. So, but
I'm glad to see I wasn't the only person that also had a little bit of struggles with like classes or in college. I think I'll tell you this. I think for being a coach, as much as I am always appreciative of the athletes who are able to do their studies well and go and be a great athlete, I think there's something to be said about the perspective of the people that struggled or didn't necessarily get to where they wanted to be,
right,
and be able to look, don't take the path I took. Like, be better.
right,
Go do it the way you want to do it, but be successful and have a plan.
right.
I will say though, I do have to. Let me phrase it this way.
Sure.
I've seen a lot more indoor track and field facilities going up in the last 5 or 6 years, and probably the last decade or so. Right.
Yep.
Do you feel like indoor track facilities are like the shiny new toy that all universities kind of want? Because it feels like that to me, at least where we're at.
Yeah, so we're actually in the process of of building a field house right now. So we have at Nazareth across the street is really one of our rivals, St. John Fisher College. So that's where I graduated from too. So I'm a little partial to them sometimes, but we're both colleges are in the same town. So for us, it was kind of like a race of, which college is going to get a field house up first, just because for the fear of the town not letting the other college, put it up, and all that zoning nonsense and what have you. But we have a field. We will be opening our field house in July. So the roof is on there, like all the walls are up. The inside is getting put together right now. But in our area, we have noticed over the course of the last few years, like SUNY Brockport just built a new field house a few years ago. Houghton College built a new field house as well. So there's a few that we have here in like Western New York. Not as many out more towards like Buffalo, like UB, they're D1. They don't have like a dedicated field house just for like track purposes.
Right.
Where I went to school at Fredonia, they were one of the first colleges, I think, in New York State or on the East Coast that actually built a field house in 1980. And they haven't done anything to it since. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing that they built then. It was the same one that I competed on for 4 years, and it's the same one that the kids are competing on now. So I'm not sure how much it's going to be as helpful, like recruiting wise, especially like at the D3 level for us. A lot of our kids ask more questions about like financial aid, the network that they're going to be graduating into when they're done. So we haven't. So even though everybody sees that this building is going up, I personally haven't seen that, and even some of the other coaches in our conference haven't seen much of a uptake in enrollment or athletes wanting to throw in that field house. It provides more opportunities for kids at the high school level, so there's more meets in our area, which is fantastic. Especially with the way it's been just exploding the last couple of years with some of the high school kids in our area. So they have more opportunities to compete. But they're really, as far as like smaller D3 schools, like, our enrollment's only 2,000 kids. So to have a field house, it's kind of a big deal, and we're really looking forward to it. I mean, it is going to be the shiny new toy. But we've been throwing in a racquetball court for 4 years, so we don't know how far we throw until we show up at a meet. So I see the good and bad, like with that, like as far as like mindset for kids and things. But it'll be nice that we won't have to travel as often. The kids will be able to stay home and actually like sleep in till like 8 o'clock, rather than like get on a bus at 6:30, 7 o'clock to go to a meet. But yeah, we're building one. I think there's some other colleges more in like Central New York that are going to start putting things up soon. But yeah, so we're lucky. But yep.
And we have a I don't want to call it a field house. It's kind of an auxiliary gym with like 3 basketball courts in it and a running track up top.
Right.
But it's big enough that we've been able to do some work with our makeshift weights and our shot. And if things work out in the future, there might be room for other things happening. We'll see what happens in the coming months and whatnot. Hope to pan out. But I do think for us, it's been very helpful. The hardest thing for us has been everybody uses it. So trying to find time to get in there because you have 6 different basketball teams between a freshman, a JV, and a varsity. And then you've got the wrestling teams, you've got the cheerleading teams, and it's just like never ends. I mean,
Right.
we're a Division I high school, so we have way more sports than I think my hometown, because I came from a small town, way more sports than I think my hometown could ever dream of.
Right. Yeah.
Let alone just be like,
Yeah.
you offer all this?
Right.
So I will say, I think some of our athletes have definitely appreciated that. But that's also part of where, when you saw some of our videos and we're throwing into that wall, that was in our middle school gym.
Okay.
So what we normally do is in the fall and the winter, we'll bring our high school and our middle school athletes over to the middle school gym, into where this upstairs balcony area and their middle school weight room. And we train a lot of our kids in those areas and make them have to, quote unquote, earn their way back to the big weight room and to the big throwing area. Again, we want that chip on their shoulder the whole time. So when they come in, they feel to fight for it and earn it every single day.
Right. No, that's great, Sean. You know, I don't have any other questions for you right now, unless you have anything else for me, you know.
Well, I don't have any other questions for you, but for anyone that is watching, you know, there's this great book out there called, you know, Thrower, you know, for its greatness and whatnot.
Right.
I'm sure that Charles, you could probably tell you where to find it.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, I appreciate that shout out. Yeah. And that's what, getting back to like the between the years type thing. That's one thing that I've noticed from, like, I competed from 2000 to 2004 as an undergrad, and we didn't really, like, I never had conversations like that with any of my coaches. So for me, it was to write that. It was more for me because it's stuff that I do with my kids all the time. So why not give the opportunity for other coaches to implement that? You know, I found that it's worked really well with my kids because we're 5, everyone's starting from scratch at the same point. So we've been kind of working through the book together. And hopefully now that we transition outdoor, once everything thaws out here, you know, we'll have a pretty successful outdoor season. So, but
no, I mean, I've recommended it to a few of our young and beginning coaches out here because I do think it offers some really good conversations that if you've never coached before, like it's worth having. For the athletes, some of them, they think about, well, I'm going to go in, do my reps, do my sets, and get out. And they never think about the bigger picture and how to get from point A to B.
Right. And I think for coaches too, I don't want to say it's like an ego check, but I ask my kids between the indoor and outdoor season, okay, you know, what worked for you, what didn't work, and what do you think?
Sorry,
no, it's okay.
I've got a little guy, so I got to run. I don't
want
to cut you.
No, that's okay.
There's going to be something spilled. So
that's
thanks again, Coach Charles. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be on the podcast.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man. Take care, okay?
Yep. All right. Bye-bye.